So that's another foreign trip almost done. And what do we make of it? Prime Minister Modi's job in Paris was relatively easy. No points of friction, no major demands or concerns. It was all about building further. And that's been the hallmark of India-France relations. Paris is actually India's first strategic partner. The agreement was signed in the year 1998. Even the Russian strategic agreement came after that in the year 2000. So France is an old and trusted partner. But where does that trust come from? Well, many things, but we'll focus on the big two. One is the defense partnership. The other is political support and understanding. France is India's second largest arms supplier. They make up around 29% of all sales, plus they're reliable. With the US, you have to worry about last-minute congressional hurdles or opposition from some random senator, but France has always come through. They've sold crucial equipment like submarines and fighter jets to India, even nuclear fuel, back in the year 1982. When the US refused to give India uranium, France stepped in. And this consistency is appreciated. The second factor is political support. In 1999, France did not sanction India after the Pokhran nuclear tests. Paris was understanding of New Delhi's position. In the year 2006, they also supported India's nuclear deal talks with the US. Then President Jacques Chirac visited New Delhi. He asked the US president to not push India too hard. That trust has continued with each French president. Macron has never criticized India's position on Ukraine. His officials have also been silent. So trust is the cornerstone of the India-France relationship. It's a very rare thing in diplomacy. Speaking of which, here's another rare development in diplomacy. 2 big-ticket foreign visits in 3 weeks. That's what Prime Minister Modi has done. First, it was the United States, and now it is France. If you followed them, you would have noticed some similarities. It wasn't your normal boring trips. There was a lot of color, a lot of public engagement, and a lot of ceremony. This has been the hallmark of Prime Minister Modi's diplomacy. Every leader has their own brand. So let's try and understand Modi's brand. 3 things stand out in the last 9 years. One is the personal touch. He's traveled to 65 countries for 70 foreign trips. That shows personal interest. Also, he's keen on building intimate equations. Just think back to all the meetings he's had, the high-profile international meetings. Obama, Trump, Biden, Netanyahu, Macron, Boris Johnson, Putin, Angela Merkel, Mohammed bin Salman. All these leaders had great equations with India's Prime Minister. And that's not always easy. Look at Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel. He was great friends with Donald Trump. But Biden won't even invite him to the White House. The Israeli president has got an invite, but the Prime Minister has not. It tells you how hard personal equations are. It's like any friendship. You either click or you don't. And those equations have led to personal honors for Modi. He's received state awards from more than a dozen countries, the latest being France. The second thing that stands out is the public engagement. Indian people are a lot more interested in diplomacy now. It wasn't always the case. In the past, diplomacy was considered elite and secretive. The men in suits would decide India's policy. The people would just nod and agree. Now you see healthy debates on social media. You see YouTubers discuss India's position on Ukraine. You get WhatsApp forwards on what the foreign minister has said in Paris or Brussels. It's a big and positive change. There is more awareness about Indian diplomacy today. People realize it's not just China and Pakistan. It's also Europe, South America, Africa. A lot is happening in the world and people are interested. And finally, factor number 3, the concert style of diplomacy. Why do I say concert? Because like concerts, Prime Minister Modi's trips have a set pattern. It's highly public, it's energetic, and it's viral. For example, the Diaspora events. They've become a feature wherever he goes. There have been events in New York, Washington, Texas, London, Sydney, Tokyo, Paris, and many other cities, and you've seen these events. There's a lot of color and a lot of participation. It is supposed to show the power of the Indian community. And these 3 things sum up Modi's brand of diplomacy. It's personal, it's energetic, and it's more engaging. And other world leaders see this. Most of them are struggling with popularity at home. President Macron, for instance, is hurtling from one protest to another in France. President Biden's approval rating is at 40%. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak in the UK was not even elected for his job. At the end of the day, these are all politicians. They all love adulation. They love the crowds. So what do? They piggyback on India and Modi's popularity. And we've seen examples of this. Donald Trump attended the Howdy Modi event in Texas. Anthony Albanese was at the Sydney rally. And Netanyahu used Modi's picture in his campaign video, so you get the idea. But has this style of diplomacy worked? Well, so far it has. India has struck a balance between the West and Russia. India also has the world's support against China. But 9 years is not enough for a comprehensive judgment. As always, history will be the better judge. And why is that? Because these factors are not just about the Prime Minister's personality, it's also about the new India. Younger Indians have a taste for foreign affairs. Other countries see India as a rising power now. These are indisputable facts. So style and policy are the result of two things: the times we live in and the people who shape it. One of the big highlights of this visit is the UPI, India's unified payment system. It's been introduced in France. Prime Minister Modi made the announcement himself. He said Indian tourists can now make payments in rupees in France.
फ्रांस में भारत के यूपीआई के उपयोग को लेकर भी समझौता हो गया है। साथियों, आने वाले दिनों में इसकी शुरुआत आईफेल टावर से की जाएगी। यानी अब भारतीय टूरिस्ट मोबाइल ऐप के जरिए आईफेल टावर में रुपये में भुगतान कर पाएगा।
It's a big deal. UPI is synonymous with digital payments in India. Since its launch, it has been a runaway success. And what is the UPI? It is India's payment system. It facilitates bank-to-bank transfers, mainly through QR codes. There are many payment apps which support UPI. The system is fast and reliable. Also, most payments are done for free. Around 330 Indian banks and 25 apps use and support UPI. From small tea stalls to grocery chains and shopping malls, everyone has a QR code. They've effectively replaced the cash register. The UPI facilitates a wide range of transactions, from transfers as small as 10 rupees to large sums running into tens of thousands of rupees. And so far it was limited to India, but now this platform is being shared with the world. It is being integrated with other platforms to enable cross-border transactions. In France, the UPI is being integrated with a system called Lyra. How will this work? Like, if you're signed up on UPI and you see a Lyra payment terminal, you'll be able to scan your phone and transact through UPI. No need for cash or a forex card. France has become the first European country to adopt the UPI, but this is not the first international player. Earlier this year, India struck a similar deal with Singapore. There, the UPI was integrated with PayNow, again to facilitate cross-border transactions. So far, 10 countries and regions have signed up. We've already told you about Singapore. The UPI also works in the US, Australia, Canada, Hong Kong, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the UAE and the UK. It is available to NRIs or non-resident Indians. They can use UPI to send money, so the technology is available, but in a limited capacity. In countries like Singapore, the UAE, Mauritius, Nepal and Bhutan, the UPI works better. These countries support UPI QR codes, so payments can be made by phones. The system will work on similar lines in France as well, which brings us to another point. Why are so many countries signing up? Because the impact of UPI has been tremendous and far-reaching. It has facilitated financial inclusion, made day-to-day transactions easier. Users don't feel the need to carry spare change or queue up outside ATMs for cash. Your UPI app takes care of everything. It was launched in 2016. Last year, the UPI moved $1 trillion in transactions. That's equal to 1/3 of India's GDP. As of March this year, 40% of all payments in India were digital, and this is no mean feat. The world has taken notice. Experts say India's model has inspired others. Countries like Brazil, they've taken a cue from UPI. In November 2020, Brazil launched its own platform. It is called Pix. It works just like the UPI. To make a payment, you scan a QR code. And in about 3 years, Pix has overtaken credit and debit cards. It is the most widely used payment method in Brazil, making up 30% of all payments in the country. So the UPI is showing the way to the world, and it has a long way to go. 7 years after it was launched, It has about 260 million users at home. That's only a fraction of India's population. There are more than 1.4 billion Indians today. As the UPI spreads overseas, it can expand its user base at home as well, and this will help India create a bigger payments network, one that can challenge the world's legacy payment systems. I will start our next story with a cartoon. It was published by the New York Times in 2014. The cartoon shows two men sitting inside a room. They're reading a newspaper. The headline says, India's Mars Mission. The room is called the Elite Space Club. On the outside, a farmer with a cow can be seen knocking on the door. He's wearing a shirt with India on it. Obviously, it is all sorts of problematic. But what else can you expect from the New York Times? And why am I telling you about this decade-old cartoon today? Because today is a historic day for India, despite all these racist cartoons, despite the low expectations, and despite the failures. India's space ambitions are only growing. Today, the Chandrayaan-3 mission lifted off. It was launched from the Satish Dhawan Space Center at Sriharikota.
Lift-off normal.
Here we have a majestic lift-off of LBM-3 M4 rocket carrying India's prestigious Chandrayaan-3 spacecraft.
Chandrayaan-3 is developed by the Indian Space Research Organization, or the ISRO. India has spent around $75 million on this mission. It consists of a lander, a propulsion module, and a rover. The next stage is detachment. The rocket detaches in two stages. The first step is done. The satellite has already separated from the launch vehicle. That is done. Now the Chandrayaan-3 will orbit the Earth. This will happen in stages. After that, it will enter the moon's orbit. Here, the lander will separate from the propulsion module, and finally, it will attempt to land on the moon. So there is still some time for that lunar landing to take place, around 40 days. But if the mission succeeds, India will join an elite club. It will be one of only 4 countries to soft land on the moon. The other 3 are Russia, China, and the United States. The Chandrayaan-3 has big goals. It wants to soft land on the surface of the moon, and that too near the South Pole. If all goes well, we will be the first ones to land near the South Pole of the moon. So this is absolutely crucial for our space ambitions. You see, the South Pole of the moon is largely unexplored. This is the area of the moon that remains in shadow. It is also larger than the North Pole, so the chances of finding water here are higher. In 2008, Chandrayaan-1 was the first to discover water on the moon. This water was also found near the South Pole, although the landing did not happen there. This time, India wants to land there. It wants to explore this new terrain, make a significant new discovery. Of course, the risk is higher, but the hopes are higher still. And this is not the first time that India is attempting it. You may remember Chandrayaan-2, it was launched in the year 2019, but this mission was only a partial success. It had 2 parts, the orbiter and the rover. The orbiter continues to circle the moon even today, but the rover failed while trying to land near the South Pole. So this is our second attempt at that, and India has set itself some lofty goals. India's space program is only 60 years old. The ISRO was set up in the year 1962. India was still a young nation state then. It had pressing economic and military challenges, but that did not stop it from dreaming big. In 1963, India launched its first rocket into space. We were no match for the other world powers then. The US and then Soviet Union were far ahead of India. But in the last 6 decades, that story has changed. Remember that cartoon we started with? India is not outside that elite space club anymore. India is a part of it. This is a stunning example of self-sufficiency, or what we call Atmanirbhar Bharat. Plus, it was achieved at a fraction of the cost. In 2014, India reached the Mars. The mission cost around $74 million. Compare that to NASA. The cheapest moon mission costs around $1.2 billion. Even the Hollywood movie Gravity had a bigger budget than India's Mars mission. And this is now a case study in leadership courses, how to beat the odds while remaining cost effective. Not just that, India is also helping other countries. It is making space technology available to the rest of the world. And the moon mission is only the beginning. The next in line is the Gaganyaan, India's manned mission to space. ISRO is also planning an independent space station. Currently, there are only two. The International Space Station, which is a joint project between a lot of countries, and then there is the Tiangong Space Station, which is controlled by China. Now, India wants to build its own, and that too by the year 2030. ISRO is also proposing to send an orbiter to Venus. Perhaps it's time for the New York Times to commission a new cartoon, one that is in sync with today's reality. If they do it, we promise to tell you about it, but don't hold your breath for it. Now let's talk about what's happening with India's neighbour. Pakistan looks set for general elections later this year. This has been confirmed by Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif. Now, in most countries, this would not be news. It would be a given. A government finishes a term and elections are held. That's how democracies function. But there's no such guarantee in Pakistan. The government of the day is not popular. They did not win elections. Their coalition filled in when Imran Khan was ousted. They've made a bigger mess of an already messy economy. But with the IMF bailout, something seems to have shifted in Pakistan. Our next report brings you the details.
Pakistan is having a rare, optimistic week. Its collapsing economy has just been propped up, thanks to the International Monetary Fund and Saudi Arabia. The IMF agreed to lend Pakistan $3 billion. $1.2 billion from that has just been disbursed. Saudi Arabia agreed to send it $2 billion. It's also expecting another billion from the UAE. So you can almost hear the sighs of relief coming from Islamabad. They might finally have enough money to make it through their economic crisis. In the short run, anyway. But the stability it gives has allowed the government to make a bold statement. It will be giving up power in August and gearing up for the general election. Now, in any other democracy, this wouldn't be big news, the government giving up power when its term ends. But it is a big deal in Pakistan, which, let's face it, isn't the best example of a democracy. Calling it a military puppet regime is probably more accurate. But nonetheless, the powers that be have decided to hold the general election. But we don't know when exactly that'll be. You see, yesterday, Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif made this announcement.
The responsibility you gave me and my party on April 2022 to take care of the country and yourselves will come to an end in August.
He said his government would step down in August, that a caretaker government will take over till elections are held, and that could be in either October or November. It's a bit of a trick. If the government stays in power till the date of dissolution, August 12th, then elections will take place in October. But if they dissolve the government even a few days earlier, then the general election will be held in November instead. It's due to a strange rule where Pakistan's Election Commission is given 30 extra days to conduct an election in case a government steps down early. Now, we mention this because when the Sharif government chooses to step down, will indicate its level of confidence. You see, it's no secret that the current regime isn't popular. It wrested power from the popularly elected government of Imran Khan last April. Reports say the military played a huge role in bringing Khan down. That he had irked them by taking them on one too many times. But Imran Khan remains extremely popular in Pakistan, which was evident in the aftermath of his arrest in May. Thousands of his supporters went on a riot. They even dared to burn down military buildings, one of the most defiant acts one can perform in Pakistan. The military and government's response has been swift and brutal. They arrested a host of Imran Khan's party members, reportedly nudged them to abandon Imran Khan and form their own party, following the grand Pakistani tradition of king's parties that are propped up by the powers that be. The crux of it is that the Pakistani establishment uses both a carrot and stick approach to cause so-called problematic parties to collapse and leave their leaders in the dust. The fact that Sharif has announced regular elections might mean the entrenched powers in Pakistan are confident of a victory. After all, Imran Khan keeps getting wrapped up in new legal cases every other day. The establishment may just corner him sooner or later, leaving an open field for Sharif's return. But despite the Pakistani military puppeting this Game of Thrones, the result of the general election isn't really certain yet. So, more electoral tactics are in the pipeline. Pakistan's political parties are reportedly working on new election laws. They will allegedly be tabled during the farewell session of Parliament later this month. Some of the changes include an increase to the official campaign spending limit. There are also proposed actions against election staff found involved in rigging votes. A parliamentarian said that there are 67 proposed amendments to Pakistan's electoral laws. But the main change that the ruling Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz wants may already be in the works: the return of Supremo Nawaz Sharif. It isn't all ironed out yet, but former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif's return and his contesting the next election could be the final piece of the puzzle. But again, this isn't final yet. We'll keep you updated as this story develops.
I'm very happy to tell you what I'm about to tell you next. Cricket is making a big stride towards gender parity. The ICC has announced a major decision. The ICC is the International Cricket Council. They will now give the same prize money to men and women at global events. Basically, all your World Cups. Let me explain how that will work. Suppose India wins the Men's T20 World Cup. They get $1 million in prize money. Now, suppose Australia wins the Women's T20 World Cup. They too will get $1 million. So, no more disparity. And in case you're wondering, yes, until now, that was not the case. Let's look at T20 World Cups to see the difference. Last year, England won the men's tournament. How much did they get? $1.8 million for the men's tournament. This year, the Women's T20 World Cup was held. Australia won it. They got just $1 million, which is 44% less than what the men got. Same format, same number of overs, same organizers, just the prize money was different. The ICC says it wants to completely eliminate pay parity by 2030, meaning not just at global events, but at all events. You see, most cricket happens bilaterally. Maybe India goes to Australia or South Africa goes to Bangladesh. The ICC does not decide the prize money for these tournaments. That depends on each cricket board, which is why this latest decision does not mean mission accomplished. There is still a long way to go. Last year, the BCCI announced pay parity for its players. Both men and women now make the same kind of money. What about other cricket boards? New Zealand was actually the first one to do it. They announced pay parity in July 2022. Australia has also set ambitious targets, but no pay parity yet. And this is a story across sports. We have some numbers for you. The average male golfer earns around $1.25 million. And female golfers, just $48,000. Now, basketball. Since NBA is the pinnacle of basketball, let's look at their numbers. The male players make $5.3 million per season. The highest paid female player got just $220,000. And let's not even talk about the average. In baseball, the gap is even worse. Male players get around $4 million and female players just $6,000. Let me repeat that for you. $4 million versus $6,000. And finally, tennis. People say tennis has done better on gender parity. To some extent, yes. The Grand Slams offer the same prize money to winners, but that's just 4 tournaments. Elsewhere, pay parity is growing. Consider this year's Italian Open. The men's tournament had a total prize money of $8.5 million. The women had just $3.9 million. Overall, women tennis players make around 80% of what men make. How is this acceptable? It's the same sport, the same set of rules and stadiums, but the prize money is vastly different. And I'm not saying things have not improved in the last decades, but it's like a drop in the ocean. We are not going as fast as we should. And one reason for that is all this, the nonsensical opposition. You've probably heard some of this. The men's events generate more money, so they should be paid more. Here's another one. No one watches women's sports, so where will the money come from? Well, I have a couple of questions for these people. Question number 1, how much has the world invested in men's sports? And how much has it invested in women's sports? I'm talking about both time and money. The men's IPL started in the year 2008 and the women's IPL 2023, almost 14 years later. So naturally, the men's tournament will generate more money, not because it's more entertaining, not because women's IPL is boring, but because the men had a massive head start. People ignore this when they talk about revenue disparity. Men's events earn more because you've invested in them. Millions of dollars and decades of time. Do the same with women and you'll see the results. Now, question number 2. How many social and cultural constraints do male athletes face? Nowadays, none. Maybe your family will frown at first, but that's about it. Not the case with many women across the world. They have to battle their families, their societies, and their religions to do what they love. Just look at Afghanistan. The Taliban have banned all female sports. The cricket team has been disbanded. The football team is living in other countries. My point is this: men's sports have had a relatively easy trajectory. The women had a harder time. More hoops, more challenges, and more frowns. I know we can't change the past, but we need to understand that past to make a better future. It wasn't sporting quality that created this revenue and pay disparity. It was discrimination. It was because the world put more money and more effort into men's sports. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. We're starting with Japan. Its space agency's rocket engine exploded during a test. In Switzerland, an artist used mountain slopes as his canvas. He used chalk and charcoal to paint 2 giant children sketching. And in the United States, a sea otter tried to steal a surfboard from a surfer family. Also, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1933, all political parties in Germany were outlawed except the Nazi Party. This happened only 6 months after Adolf Hitler was appointed as Germany's new chancellor. This became a pivotal moment in Germany's transformation from a democracy to a dictatorship. We're leaving you with that. Thanks for watching. Have a good weekend. We'll see you on Monday.
In Deutschland kommen und muss sagen.カウント終了します。